Okay, so here's an update. It has been 34 days and it should be close to finished as far as fermentation goes. And so what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to rack over. And then after we rack over, we're going to test the specific gravity. And we are going to see how close we are to 0.998 or 0.995. We have all the equipment washed and ready to go. Here's the carboy that we'll be racking into. And of course, here is the cherry mead or cherry melomel. We have this towel so that whenever we get pretty close, we can tilt it over a little bit, tilt this carboy over, because we're going to need to try to get as much juice out as we can. But of course, we want to leave the sediment. And this, as you can tell, is not a 3-gallon version anymore. We decided we wanted to double it, and it's a good thing that we moved it to the other carboy, because our glass carboy, we didn't realize this, we just bought it, it had a hairline crack in the bottom, and so had we left it in that carboy, we would have been in trouble. And so we ended up, since we had to move it anyway, we doubled the batch, exactly the same recipe as what we recorded on the cherry melomel video. Okay, so we are going to rack this over, and then after that we'll get a specific gravity reading. Okay, so first you want to put the racking cane, the tube from the racking cane in here. And considering it's such a big carboy, both of these are 7-gallon. See, look up here. See, it's a long way down, but you're going to use gravity on your side for this siphon hose. And again, the hose and the cane have both been cleaned and sanitized. So what you're going to do is you're going to get it going. And there it goes right there. And you're just going to let gravity do the work for you. And of course, the reason we're doing this is we're trying to get all the sediment out of the cherry melomel. Because as you remember, we added bentonite and we added pectic enzyme. And so we're trying to get all of the dead yeast and all of the bentonite out of the cherry melomel. And so we're going to rack down to about right here. And so we're going to get as much juice as we possibly can. But about right here, there's going to be sediment down there. It's going to be the bentonite, and it's going to be the dead yeast. The cherry melomel should almost be finished. Of course, whenever we started the melomel, it was bubbling prevalently. And over time, it's gotten slower and slower. It is still producing a bubble once every about 5 minutes. And so we do expect it to be pretty close to 1 or maybe 1010, so 1.010, somewhere in that area. So the expectation, of course this isn't always true, but most of the time it's true, is whenever a mead has been setting for a month and the bubble is slowed down, you're usually at 1010, which again is 1.010 or less. Of course, it just depends on the fervency of the yeast and how well the melomel or the mead is fermenting. I've had a mead that only needed a week to complete its fermentation, and I have had meads that took the entire month. We haven't tasted this mead at all. The only thing that we've done is what we showed on the last video. And so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be racking over. And again, this is the first rack over. Some like to rack over after 1 week, and that's perfectly fine. You can do that. Typically, we like waiting the entire month. We like the mead to go ahead and finish. And then after that month, and it's a month and maybe a few days. And sometimes a little less than a month, but it's pretty close to a month. We like to let it go ahead and finish, and then we rack over. And the reason why that is we want to preserve as much juice as we possibly can. Every time that you rack, you're going to lose some volume. And so it's a battle sort of between trying to keep as much juice as you possibly can and also trying to get a very clean mead so that it's clear. And of course you can see on the video this is going to be a dark mead. It's really dark. It's as dark as a Merlot or a Sauvignon wine. It's really, really dark. So we're probably going to also age this 3 or 4 months before we really start drinking it. Some have suggested that any of the dark meads wait 1 year before you drink it, but that may be when it's at its best. But quite honestly, if it's a good mead, we just don't want to wait that long. We want to go ahead and start enjoying it early. And of course, it also allows you to see the changes in the mead over time. So if it's good at 3 or 4 months, it should be, if it needs age, it'll be even better at 6 months, 8 months, and then a year. But that way, and of course I'm just making an excuse so I can drink mead, but that way you can sort of compare the differences in time and see if it's getting, a lot better or a little better. We also racked over my wife's blueberry mead today, and it was incredible. It was a really, really great mead. We also racked over a spiced mead, which we made for Christmas, and it's going to go to a lot of our friends. But with the spiced mead, from what I understand, it definitely needs 3 to 4 months minimum. And most put at least 6 months whenever it comes to aging, because it takes a little while for the spice flavor to really come through. You need some age. We started ours in July, a little bit after we started the cherry mead. And so by the time the holidays roll around, we will have about 3.5 to 4 months of age on the spice mead, and it should be good. And for that spice mead, we used allspice, clove, cinnamon, and nutmeg, and it was really good. The smell was incredible. The spice mead smelled just absolutely wonderful whenever we were racking it over, and our expectation of taste was a little higher. My wife and I were talking about it just based upon the aroma. We thought it was going to taste, first racking a 10. And she rated it at about an 8, 8.5. And again, that's just the first racking. And I rated it about a 9, 9.2. But after some time goes by, the spice mead should be better. It's hard for you to see through here, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep this. And can you shine it over here? Or shine it over here. Can you record this? So we're going to use this light because the mead is so dark to try to see the cane. And I can. Can you get the camera there? So you can barely see the cane, and I don't know if the camera's catching that, but you can see it right there, the end of it. And so that way I'm going to be able to make sure that I don't get any sediment, or as least amount as possible. Of course, this is the first racking, and so you're going to have some sediment. But by the second racking, when you're getting closer to bottling, you should try to get as much sediment out as possible. Now, I have heard from other mead makers that there are those who don't rack at all, and what they do is they go straight from the carboy after the mead finishes and they bottle. And so if you do that, you will have some sediment, you will have some yeast. But if you don't care, if that doesn't bother you, then that's absolutely fine. We're going to give some of these bottles away, so we just want to make sure that whenever it comes out of the bottle into the glass, that it's nice and clear and there's nothing floating around, because of course if your friends don't understand mead and mead making, they may think that something's wrong with it. On the Melomel that my wife and I made, we actually bottled it. We waited a month after fermentation and all the back sweet and everything that we did to it. We gave it another month in the carboy, and we thought that would be enough time, then there wouldn't be any sediment. But then when we bottled it, we noticed about a month later that there was some sediment in the bottles. And so we ended up uncorking all of those bottles and giving it about another two and a half weeks in the carboy, and then we rebottled again. And so it was a little bit of a pain, and my wife was absolutely against it at the beginning, but the end result was really good. The lime Melomel is extremely clear now. So as you can see, I'm tilting over, and I don't know if you can see through the carboy, but there is some sediment left behind, and that is the dead yeast and the bentonite. Yeah, and one time in the first video, I called it benzonite on accident. It is bentonite, which really helps to clear along with the peptic enzyme. Okay, so that's about all I'm going to get. And as you can see, I got most of the juice. A little bit was left behind, but not bad. And so what I'm going to do now is I want to take the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and put the cane in here, and then take the bottom of the hose and put it in the carboy just so it doesn't leak everywhere. And in a little bit, we will clean that. We want to get it really clean and sanitized. But for right now, we want to focus on the one we just racked over to, this one. And you can see it was about 6.5 gallons, a little over that. And here's the 7-gallon mark. The 6-gallon mark's around in here. So we lost, you can see, almost no juice. That's maybe, I don't know, a quarter of a 750 milliliter bottle, which is usually what we put it in. Maybe not even that much. But if you can see that sediment and how hazy this is compared to what we have in here, it's really a huge difference. Yeah. So next we're going to show you how to test specific gravity. Alright, so what we're going to do now is, here's the turkey baster, and it has been cleaned and sanitized. And something that we do is we go ahead and put the hydrometer, and actually let me show this to you. So the hydrometer is going to test specific gravity. It's going to tell us where we are as far as the alcohol content and also the sugar content. And if you see this one right here, the one below a 1 means that there's no more sugar, that there's nothing more for the yeast to eat. And so if it's under 1, then we know it's finished. And then we can add the potassium metabisulfite and the sorbate. Of course, we usually let it set at least a week before we do that. But let me tell you, so this is a test tube. I go ahead and put the hydrometer in here because when I start filling up the juice, if I don't put it in, I won't know how much juice I'm going to need to put in order to float the hydrometer. So if I put the juice in first, no hydrometer, and then I put the hydrometer in, what we found is several times is we get an overflow of juice, or there's not enough juice in to float it. If it's already in there, of course, we know we have enough. Okay, and also I'm going to press down this because you don't want to add oxygen to your mead. And then I'm just going to, carefully as possible, trying not to spill any of the mead, and get it in the hydrometer. And this usually takes about 2.5 turkey baster fulls. Alright. Maybe like 2.25. Okay, so I'm going to put this over in the cleaner, and now we are going to look at the specific gravity. And as you can see, it's floating low, and so more than likely it's finished. I spin my hydrometer to make sure there are no bubbles on it, because it still has CO2 from the yeast. And so now we're going to take a reading. And as you can see, it's really close. It's at, alright, let me make sure I have it off of the side. It looks like it's right at 0.998 to 1. No, maybe right at 1, right? So yeah, so it's right at 1. A couple of times it bobbed, but it looks like it's right on 1. So what that means is it's pretty close to finish. It doesn't have hardly any sugar left for the yeast to eat. And so this was a good time to rack over. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we take the hydrometer out. I'm going to put it over here. This is my green tea. Let me move this out of the way. We put it over here in the cleaner. And then we get our first tasting. So we pour a little bit of this into a wine glass. And then the rest back into the mead. And of course that's been cleaned and sanitized, and so that is okay. And so what we want to look at now is color. And can you see that? Mm-hmm. Let me hold that to the light a little bit. So it has a good color. It's pretty. It doesn't have hardly anything floating around in it. And so now it's time to taste it. So here I go. Wow, that is pretty good. So now my wife, I'm going to grab the camera out of her hands. So what did you think?
I think it's good.
Yeah, it turned out really good. What would you rate that on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think that's a 10. That's really good.
Yeah, so my wife rated it a 10. I think that I would rate it pretty close to that. I didn't think that it was going to be as good as the blueberry mead, but it was.
I think I like this better than the blueberry.
You like that better than the blueberry?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really good. It turned out great. That's makes us really happy considering how much we have. I mean, that would be a lot of mead if it turned out bad, right? And so that's it. What we're going to do now is we're going to cap this. We'll put a airlock and a carboy on it. We're going to let it set for a couple of more days just to make sure that there's absolutely no more fermentation that's going to go on. After that, we're going to add sodium metabisulfite, or not sodium, excuse me, potassium. We use sodium metabisulfite for sanitizing, but potassium metabisulfite for finishing, along with sorbate. And we'll show you another video on how to do that. And we also have to degas the mead to make sure that there's no CO2. Is it CO2, right? Yeah, CO2 in it. And so we want to make sure that it's not going to blow the corks off of the bottles after we cork it, or the bottle's blowing up or anything like that. So we have to degas it, and we have to finish it. And the the potassium metabisulfite and the sorbate are both going to cocoon the yeast and make sure that there's no new fermentation. And so again, it's making sure that we're not going to have corks exploding in the other room. And when we get to that process, we'll make another video. Anything else, Dad? All right. Okay, so it's been a couple of days, and the cherry mead is done fermenting. And so what we're going to be doing this time is finishing the mead, which is going to require adding potassium metabisulfite, and it is also going to require adding potassium sorbate. And so both of them will stop the mead from initiating any more fermentation. So if you're corking the way we do, we take a 750 milliliter bottle, we cork it just like a wine bottle, and we keep our mead that way. So if you have CO2 building up, if the mead starts to ferment again, it will start blowing the corks off of the bottles, and the mead will be leaking out onto the floor, which of course we do not want. Additionally, we're going to do something called degassing, and this is a whipping cane that we're going to use to degas. Okay, so first we're going to put in the potassium sorbate, and as you can see, it is a stabilizer. It takes half a teaspoon per gallon, and we have 6. And here is the potassium metabisulfite. It takes a quarter of a teaspoon per gallon, and again we have 6 gallons. So I'm going to add both of those to the cherry mead, and then after that we're going to use the drill and the whipping cane to degas it. Okay, so now we have added the potassium metabisulfite and the sorbate, and so now we're going to degas. And you kind of want to take this slow. As you can see, it's foaming up on top. If you start out too fast, it can shoot over the top, and that is horrible. It has happened to me one time. And what I'm doing when I'm stopping is that I'm reversing the drill. And so I'll go one direction for a little while, then I'll reverse the drill and go the other way. Yeah, so the general rule is you want to do this for about 5 minutes, and I'm just about at that time. And it's sort of difficult to do it while holding the camera in one hand and degassing in the other. But what you're doing is you're removing the CO2 from the mead, which you want to get out if you don't want it to be a sparkling mead, which I don't. And so you're going to do this for about 5 minutes. You'll have it go in one direction, then you'll reverse the drill and go in the other direction. And as you can see, it's really foaming. And so we're getting all the CO2 out of the mead. Okay, so we finished whipping and picked it up, put it on the counter. And as you can see, when I disconnect the drill, I just leave the whipping cane in there because if you pull this out, it has a lot of liquid on it and it'll get all over the floor if you're not careful. So when I go to transfer the whipping cane, I'm actually going to put it in here so I can get it over the sink. And while I was doing this, it's only been 2 days and I cleaned and sanitized everything. But when I removed the bung, I went ahead and I cleaned it again and sanitized it again along with the lid. And that washcloth has been soaked in potassium metabisulfite, and so it's clean on bottom. And I highly recommend, keeping everything as clean and sanitized as possible. That way you don't get any foreign agents in your mead, because if you do, we have added the potassium sorbate and the potassium metabisulfite, but early on, especially if you get any wild yeast in your mead, it's really bad. It can throw off the flavors and you're not going to get as good a mead as you would have. And so you kind of need to be a little bit of a clean freak when you're making mead, as much as possible at least. And just make sure you keep foreign agents out of there as much as possible. Alright, so we're going to remove that whipping cane. We're going to put it into the pitcher, and then I'll move it over there and rinse it off. I will seal this with the lid and the air bung, and after that it's going to set 1 more week. And then after that week we will bottle, and I'll have another video on bottling, and we will definitely drink some mead, some of this cherry mead while we're bottling.